What's good? What's good, everyone? Welcome back to the show, Recap with Mo, where we getting ready to get into another episode breakdown of BounceTV's own Johnson series. But before we get into this thing, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss shiznit that's going down right here, all right? So the episode we getting ready to get into for tonight is Season 3, Episode number 5, titled Common Ground. Now, the synopsis for this episode states that Keith and Booker try to come to an understanding. Omar reconnects with Naomi. Greg enlists the fellas' help on a plan to get Reggie out of his house for good. And then we also have a guest appearance from the artist, the musical artist, Patrick Paige, all right? So now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this thing. All right, man, so we start this episode off with Jarvis, who seems a little bit excited while he's coming through his house or whatnot, and then he walks into the kitchen and he sees his kitchen in disarray. All right, so he's headed up to here and he's immediately going to the problem. And that just so happens to be his homeboy, Greg. Now, Greg has been residing at his property for quite a while now, and he's actually leasing his house, or is he leasing? Well, obviously, he's giving it out to somebody. I'm not really going to say lease at this point. But anyhow, so Jarvis feels at this point that, Greg is potentially taking his brotherly kindness for weakness. So when he comes into the room, he wakes Greg up. Hey, man, something has to change. And Greg is like, okay, you want me to clean up? You want me to do this? Whoop, whoop, whoop. Whatever you need me to do, I will do. And as a matter of fact, Jarvis is like, look, man, I need you to get up out. Like, I need you to go. I don't need you to collect $200. I just need you to go. That's exactly what I need you to do. Greg is like, for real, bro? That's what we about to do? Like, you kicking me out? He was like, man, we cannot do it. We are on two different levels and two different understandings when it comes to cleanliness. You see what I'm saying? Like you leave clothes everywhere, you leave dishes everywhere. And he was like, well, you got a dishwasher. You have a washer and dryer. Like, you can just wash it. Like, he's like, but I shouldn't have to tell a grown-ass man to pick up after himself. All right? So, essentially, he kicks him out. It is what it is. And with fellas, man, we don't get bothered too much. We might be pissed off at that point, but we will eventually get over it. So anyhow, going on from there, we see both Omar and Robin. They are getting ready to run in the park. And after they finish running, Robin could tell something was off with Omar. So she was like, what, you had a rough night last night? You just don't look the same. And he was like, well, you're asking me. You should already know. She was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, well, you already know that Bianca was picked up. Like, you snitched on her or whatnot. And she was like, okay, what did you want me to do? Did you not want me to do my job? And he was like, well, I did not want it to go down like that. I was trying to help her. And she was like, Omar, you cannot seriously believe that they were not watching you. And I did all of this to protect you. Now, let me tell y'all something else on the slick side, all right? So, me personally, and I've been saying this for quite some time, and I'm going to keep saying it, Robin, I believe, has liked Omar for years, all right? Even when they go back to school. Like, I could tell when he initially came into her office that day that she was she was ready and willing at that point, because it rekindled something in her. And the way she was looking at this brother in this episode, I was like, hell yeah. Like, it's there. You see what I'm saying? And we'll get into that a little bit later as their conversation progresses. But anyhow, she was like, look, are you seriously telling me right now that you were honestly willing to give up your freedom for this girl who has lied and who has stolen your money? Like, honestly, that's what she was doing to Omar this whole time. And he sort of looked like, hell no, I'm not willing to do that. But he knew she was right at the same time. So she was honestly looking out for you, bro. From there, we head over to Keith's mother's house, where we see her serving Booker some chips and some guacamole. So while she's doing that, Keith is over there looking, sideways at Booker's head, because he feeling he's feeling some type of way about Booker being over there to begin with. So anyhow, his mom is so super excited about it. She was like, look, I made this homemade for you, Booker. Try that out. Let me know what you think about it. So Keith is like, hold on, wait a minute. Like, you ain't never made no homemade guacamole before, though. And she was like, well, Booker gave me an international recipe, and recipe booklet or whatnot, and I've been going through that thing and trying out different dishes. And he was like, yeah, it's delicious too. So anyhow, she said, well, I'm going to go ahead and go get dressed real quick, and I'll be back, and we're going to go out, all right? So anyhow, while she walking up out the room, Booker is leaned over there on the side like he don't even see Keith, and he watching her as she walks up out the room. Keith is still sitting there like, what the hell you doing? Like, what are you doing? So anyhow, Booker is now trying to hold a whole conversation with Keith after he just did what he did. So Keith is like, hold on, wait a minute. I know we just not going to have this conversation. But Booker is like, look, man, I want you to know that I really love spending time with your mama. You know what I'm saying? And, Riri is such a good woman. And he was like, hold on, wait a minute. Keith is like, hold on. Who in the hell is Riri? He said, oh, that's the name I gave your mama or whatnot. And she called me Papa Bear. Man, I don't even know how to... I can't even say I understand Keith's situation right now, because I honestly, man, I don't know how I would respond in that situation. You were just eyeing down my mom's, and then you sitting over here telling me what she calls you as a nickname and all of this stuff. And not only that, Keith is like, look, man, I need you to respect my moms and whatnot. He was like, yeah, I respect her. But he says, as a matter of fact, Keith, the next time you consider yourself coming over here, you might want to call first. Keith is like, what? This is my mama's house. He was like, no, the next time you need to call, because I might be over here bucket. He said, I like you. Oh, man, I can't even get it out. I mean, he said, I might be over here bucket naked. And Keith was like, fool, this is what you going to tell me, and you try to date my mama? He was like, look, man, I'm just trying to let you know I like to let it sway. And Keith had this look on his face as you said it right here on this photo right here. Out of all the photos I had to show you, it was this one right here, all right? Because this stank look on his face right now. His mom is excited as hell, but Keith ain't feeling this at all. Anyhow, going on from there, we head back to see Robin and Omar sitting down resting, and she's like, well, what are you going to do now? And then he was like, I don't know. And then she's like, well, maybe Naomi will, have a change of heart. I mean, technically, you guys are still married or whatnot. And he was like, well, she's actually seeing someone else. And he tells her who it is, some rich private equity investor or something like that. And she sort of chuckles a little bit. And then she says, well, hopefully, Naomi will, come around. And if not, it's her lost. And I was like, there it is, Omar. Like, she's looking at you like, hold on, bro. Check that out right there. Look at her. That's what I was saying, but he wasn't listening to me. So I'm like, man, she throwing it at you, Omar. And he sees it. He knows it as well. But he trying to stay honest, man. Listen, man, let me move on before I get in trouble with y'all. Anyhow, going on from there, we see Omar and Greg having a conversation at Omar's crib, and they are discussing the whole situation that went down with Robin snitching on Bianca. And Omar is like, look, I'm just honestly glad that it's over, that the baby's not mine and all this stuff that she was, he's just glad that it's over. And, while they're there, Omar's son Caleb is down there playing football with his friends or whatnot. So, Omar is communicating to his son how to throw the ball, and Greg is noticing all of that. So, while he's watching this, Greg is like, he wants to ask Omar a question. So he says, well, Omar, what changed for you when you had a child, when you had your son Caleb? And Omar was like, hold on, wait a minute, are you catching baby fever or whatnot? Because ladies, we do catch it as well. And I know a lot of y'all know that, like, y'all not the only ones. Like, there was a time I know for sure, like after my wife and I got married, not initially, like I wanted to be, just me and her so we can do all the things we wanted to do, right? And then, but it came a time where I honestly wanted kids, earlier than my wife did. You see what I'm saying? So it was sort of like I was constantly on my grind trying to set up things financially, things as a whole to make our context better for if that time came, then we would be, mentally, physically, and financially, prepared for that occasion. Of course, my wife wasn't there yet, so I had to slow my roll because I know I just can't make one by myself. So I had to understand that. But honestly, I was like, man, it's time to start it off. But you got to be respectful. So, I was like, okay, but I'm glad that we waited. I'm glad that we came to an understanding that worked out for the both of us. You see what I'm saying? But anyhow, moving on. I know y'all didn't come here to hear about me. While they were there with the fellas started calling them out from the porch, like, come on down here, what y'all gonna do? Whoop, whoop, whoop. Greg is like, oh, I'm ready. I want all the smoke. Omar's like, man, these kids are different nowadays. You might need to hold off a little bit. And Greg is like, man, forget that. Let's go ahead and go down there. But see, as you recall, Greg has no responsibilities, my people. He has no house that he's really doing anything with. He has no for real job, for real. He floats around like nothing else is going on. So for him, it is easy peasy to go out there and play with young guys and play football. I'm telling you today, even at my young age, I'm not going to play football with no young kids. Like, I might go out there and throw the ball with my son or whatnot, but I'm not playing with a whole group of young guys. No ma'am, no sir, not me. And I'm not... and I'm not even that old. I'm just saying, man, I'm not doing it. But anyhow, they go ahead and go out there. Omar is playing the quarterback. Greg is playing the wide receiver. And of course, he goes out there. He catches the ball. It looks good. He catches the ball, but he gets tackled by Caleb. He gets up. They have to help him up off the ground because his ass done knocked down. So he gets up. He's holding his shoulder. He's telling Omar, man, I think it's broken. Well, it's not actually broken. We find out that he's done something else to it. I think sprung it or something like that. But of course, Caleb got injured as well. So that takes us to where we are now, where we see both Omar and Naomi sitting in the waiting room at the hospital or wherever they've decided to take Caleb. And Naomi is pissed, of course, like all mothers would, if their child is sitting in the hospital because they injured themselves playing a sport, number one, that she did not want him to play. Omar is like, well, he wanted to play it. He loves playing the sport. She's like, look, somebody has to be the adult. Somebody has to make the wise decisions. So I hear the positives on both ends. I also see that they need to communicate. And that's one thing that they actually did do this time was communicate and not just talk to one another or talk at one another. So I was glad that they actually got to communicate one-on-one, because she did throw some pettiness in there where she was like, well, instead of let me go back a little bit, because what happened was he asked her about the situation where she and what's his name, Shamar Moore, what they call him. What did he used to play on one of those those little daytime soap operas, right? And she was like, oh, what are you talking about? He was like, well, my uncle gave me the job at the lounge as a manager, and I saw you and old boy coming in. So she tells him a little bit about him, and she was like, well, it's nothing serious. He works for the company, whoop, whoop, whoop. That somebody I can just talk to, this and that. You see what I'm saying? And she was like, well, while you worried about this situation, you need to be worried about your new baby that you got. So Omar's like, well, that's actually not true. And I actually don't have a baby. It was all a lie. So Naomi was like, oh, really? So she tried to act like she didn't care, but you could tell that she actually did care. And I think deep down inside that I honestly feel like she's happy that he doesn't have another child. we'll see how that turns out later on as the season progresses. But anyhow, I'm glad that they were able to talk and put all of their pettiness to the side. All right, because I saw pettiness on both sides, but I'm glad that they were able to overcome those things and have a for real dialogue with everything that was going on in this context. But anyhow, going on from there, we head over to the lounge. And I'm going to be honest with y'all. When I first heard the music playing in the background, I was like, oh, shoot, is that D'Angelo? Like, because it almost sounded like that. I was like, all right. But it wasn't. It was not that. So I was like, okay. So actually, the fellas were meeting up at the lounge. At first, it was just Omar, Greg, and Keith. They were hanging out. And then, of course, Jarvis came later on to join the fellas or whatnot. But before Jarvis got there, they were having this whole conversation about Naomi and Bianca, that whole situation that went down. Omar again just stated that he was glad that it was over. But anyhow, while they're in the midst of that, Jarvis finally shows up, and then they talk about his situation with Pop Nelson and and Pop Johnson, because they had their little 7-second fight at his mom and dad, well, his ex-mom and dad's crib, right? Because I honestly still feel like he's going to have a relationship with those individuals that raised him, because it would be hard as hell for him to neglect that situation when that's all he's ever known. And I know he's trying to do right by Pop Nelson, but at the same time, the people that raised you as a Johnson, man, I know the way that they did it, it was wrong. But in some type of way, you need to get all of this back into order. And I hope that he does that, all right? But anyhow, while they're in the midst of all of this, Jarvis gives some good news to Keith. He states that before he got there, he was on a phone call with one of the main editors of the magazine companies from the meet and greet that they were at previously. Now, the meet and greet where Keith went off on the councilman. And, by the way, since we're talking about the councilman, what in the hell happened to the councilman situation in this daggone episode? I was waiting on this situation to come up, because in episode number 4 at the end, Keith was able to find out a little bit about the people that were assisting in the gentrification of the hood. And that's what I was looking for. Hopefully we'll get it in the next episode. Obviously, that's probably where it's going to be. But anyhow, getting back on this one right here. So Keith was excited. He was ecstatic about it. And I was happy for him because, anytime black brothers and sisters are making money, I get excited. All right. So going on from there, we see the fellas getting ready to take in around the shots. But before the shots are delivered out or distributed to the fellas, Greg wants to make sure that everyone knows that this is going to be it for the night, because everybody needs to head home. Actually, I don't have a home because one of my homeboys kicked me out the house. So I'm going to need y'all bright and early in the morning. So I need y'all's minds to be good, essentially. That's what he's trying to convey to y'all. So anyhow, the next morning, now, let me tell y'all, when this scene came about, I was like, what the hell is about to go down? So old boy Reggie is in the house with a bonnet on his head, I believe, and looked like a little miniature beard bonnet or whatnot. Now, I know y'all haven't seen my picture, but I got a little beard. It's a nice little thick beard, but it's not, thick enough for me to have a damn bonnet on. But anyhow, you know what I'm saying? It's just crazy what people got to do to, I guess, to preserve whatever they got going on. But anyhow, so Reggie's laid up in the bed, sleep, snoring or whatnot, when this loud-ass radio pops on in the house. Of course, it wakes him up. He comes out. Jarvis is coming out of the bathroom looking like... looking like Pop on Friday or whatnot, telling that man don't go in there. You need to at least give it 30 or 45 minutes before you go into that bathroom. Of course, Reggie smells what's going on in there. He got Reggie's toothbrush in his mouth, and we find that out later as well. So when he comes in, he was like, what's going on? He was like, I'm one of the new roommates. And he was like, no, we ain't got no other roommates. What's going on? He was like, oh, yeah, we good. So they walk inside of the kitchen, and you see Keith and Omar sitting at the table. Keith is over here eating the Rice Krispies with his hand and a spoon, and he was like, hold on, are those no, not Rice Krispies, cornflakes. He was like, are those my cornflakes? He was like, oh yeah, man, he got a whole damn spoon in there. So anyhow, Greg comes in and he was like, what's good, Keith? Not Keith. What's good, Reggie? He was like, man, I just wanted to let you know I brought all these other brothers in to help us with the rent, help us pay for things around here to take some of the load off. And then Reggie looks at him like, man, what's going on? But then he was like, oh, I see what you're trying to do. And Greg was like, what you talking about? He was like, yeah, man, I see what you up to. He said, now you think that I'm going to get up out of here voluntarily because you got all these others in here? Like, that's what you think I'm about to do right now? He said, man, I'm from Chi-Town. You already knew it before I said it, right? And he was like, man, I grew up in a context like this where I had 10 brothers and sisters in my house. And this is nothing at all. So then he walks his ass over to the couch, sits down and crosses his legs like he good. So, of course, the fellas walk in there with him as well. They all sit down around the couch. And then Jarvis takes off his coat and he got on a jumpsuit like he out of jail. And he was like, hey, man, you think they're going to look for me here? So anyhow, looking at Reggie's face when he's talking about, man, you think they're going to find me here? He turns over there slowly just to see what's going on. Omar is pulling on his beard bonnet. And he's making him feel very, very uncomfortable at this moment. So anyhow, he was like, man, we good, man. If something go down, then we'll have to shoot you up out of here. Everybody in this household gonna go down. Reggie's like, hold on, wait a minute. I don't know this dude right here. I ain't having no he said, I ain't having no shootout with nobody. I ain't having no shootout with no police. He was like, as a matter of fact, y'all can have the house. So he get up. They was like, where you going? Nah, man, everybody going down. He was like, no, not me. He said, now, all this time you've been talking about I'm from Chicago. All this time, Reggie, you've been talking about I'm from Chicago and I run this, I do this, whoop, whoop, whoop. But all of a sudden now when they start talking about you from Chicago, you should be used to shooting out and all this stuff. Now all of a sudden you want to talk about, no, I'm from a nice little suburb on the outside. On the outside, I was like, man, get the hell up out of here, man. And that's exactly what he did, because his ass rolled in there. Man, I was trying to do good with the swear. So he walks up out of there, man, and he brings in his little suitcase, and then he has the audacity to say, hey, man, what about the return on my deposit? Greg was like, what the hell are you talking about? Wasn't no deposit? He was like, oh, I thought you wouldn't remember that. And then I said, I'm going to miss Reggie. I'm going to miss Reggie's character. Y'all got to bring that brother back, man, because he brought a lot of comedy to the show, man. I'm from Chicago. I already know how this goes. Like, we need that in our lives right now. So anyhow, man, that's the end of the episode, man. I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope that you guys are enjoying my recaps and reviews on this series right here. If you know somebody else that would enjoy this, please like and share as well. With that being said, man, I'll see y'all soon, man. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.